Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
He's political. He's political science professor emeritus Dr. Robert A. Heineman. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for inviting me again, Brian.
He's political. Dr. Heineman, Iran in the aftermath of the death of General Soleimani. Missiles have been coming from Iran twice so far. President Trump, though, seems to be resisting the temptation of neocon advice and getting into a full-blown war with Iran.
Yeah, so I think it's clear he doesn't want a full-blown war with Iraq or Iran. With Iran, right?
Iran.
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty clear. First, I think, in general, we once again have to make the distinction between Iraq and Iran in the sense that they're really two totally different kinds of countries. Iran, Persia, has been around for thousands of years. It's basically a nation. Iraq is a conglomeration of tribes and geographic areas that were put together during the colonial era, and to find it as a nation, it's just not there. And, of course, they still have divisions of one sort or another. And, again, it wouldn't take much for the whole thing to split apart into two or three different areas. So you're talking about two different kinds of countries, and the importance here is, in terms of dealing with Iran, invading Iraq is one thing. I mean, you're going in there, there's all kinds of different divisions. Trying to invade and go into an all-out war with Iran, not that we wouldn't be successful, but now you're talking about a country which has a real sense of nationalism and has a real sense of pride, and there's no sense going down that road. But I do think the dealing with Soleimani showed, first and foremost, our capability to pinpoint targets and destroy them, and second, our willingness to do that if we're sufficiently pushed. So that has to have some repercussions, I think, across the world in terms of not only our negotiations with the Taliban, with whom we're negotiating right now in terms of trying to get a peaceful withdrawal from Afghanistan, but also countries like North Korea with Kim Jong-un, who thinks, again, he can keep pushing us, and the idea that he can continue to do that.
Man, he's like a mean school kid sometimes. Wants to see how far he can go.
Yeah, clearly there's a line there somewhere, and it's up to him. As well, I think it has let some of our European allies know that beyond a certain point, we just will not be pushed. Now, again, it does look like Iran is backing off, primarily, I think, because in terms of going head-to-head with the United States, I mean, that'd be a ridiculous situation for the Iranians. Their army isn't that large, and I think the economic sanctions that Trump keeps putting on them is really hurting them. Plus, they've had some serious nationwide outbreaks of protest the past few weeks. So people are pretty unhappy generally. So at any rate, the thing does seem to be quieting down, and it looks like they have asked the United States to come in and give them some help with this airliner that went down with, I think, about 180, 170 people on a Ukrainian airliner, and increasingly it appears that they may have shot it down themselves.
Iran.
Yeah, accidentally, it appears, but I guess they're trying to figure out what happened. And so there's some promising signs there. Nothing terribly bright, but at least it's quieting down a little bit.
Dr. Bob, tied to this whole Iranian situation, it seems, at least judging by the actions of Congressman Adam Schiff, the California Democrat there, seemed that he and maybe other Democrats were hoping for this Iranian situation to motivate both Democrats and maybe some Republicans to get on the bandwagon for impeachment again.
Well, I think there are all kinds of hopes and fears circulating there inside the Beltway. And right now, the Democrats don't look like they're in a particularly good position, although, again, they have the majority in the House of Representatives. But Pelosi continues to insist on withholding impeachment articles. At first, I think she was hopeful that she would begin to break away some of the maverick Republicans in the Senate, but that doesn't seem to be going that way at all right now. And so there she is sitting there holding these impeachment articles, which everybody thinks are going nowhere once they get into the Senate. So her approach seems to be to just hold on to them. Now, at some point, McConnell is going to just go ahead, or he's going to say, look, we waited long enough, we're moving on with other business. So right now, I think he's pretty much in the driver's seat.
Is that how it works? If he moves on to other impeachment and other issues, impeachment would be gone?
Well, not necessarily. I guess she could eventually send it over there, but at some point, I think McConnell can say, look, we waited 6 weeks, 8 weeks. This is ridiculous. We don't have to consider it.
Because they were all hyper to do it before, the impeachment on the Democrat side.
Yeah. And even Schumer's kind of seems to be backing off a little bit at this point. In fact, you see, McConnell, first of all, says he has the votes to go ahead and set the rules for how they're going to deal with it. And Schumer's saying, well, he's hopeful that he may pick up a few wavering Republicans, which indicates pretty clearly that McConnell has a vote and Schumer does not. Those guys got a pretty good sense of what's happening. Now, the other point that's kind of interesting is that the House now is going to try to revamp the War Powers Act and put stronger limits on the president's ability to act in Iraq. And Congress would, I think, have some authority to do that. How far they're willing to go in that respect, I don't know. But since the whole thing seems to be settling down, I don't know, that it seems to me there may be less impetus for that as well. So that kind of follows that, and then let's hope it helps us in our negotiations with the Taliban. I'd just like to get us out of Afghanistan as soon as possible, frankly.
Have you noticed how anti-Trump Tucker Carlson's gotten on Fox because of keeping troops over there?
Yeah. Well, we still have a lot of troops over in the Mideast area. I've seen estimates of up to 80,000. Last one I think I saw was 50,000. But they're spread all over. They're in Afghanistan. They're in Iraq. They're in Saudi Arabia. They're in the small states along the Gulf of, along the edge of Saudi Arabia. We're in Somalia, and I assume we have some troops probably in places like Egypt and Syria. And we still have some troops in Syria. I think one of the things that's happening over there right now is Turkey is beginning to become much more aggressive in sending troops around. They've sent troops and aid to Libya, and I think that's not going to work out for the Turks. They're supporting the Libyan government, and the rebels there, I think, about to take complete control of Libya. But the Turks also are going to go after the Kurds along their border because they consider the Kurds basically terrorists, which they are inside Turkey. So you're getting a much more active much more activity on the part of the Turks, which we, frankly, do seem to kind of encourage. I think one of Trump's whole views here is let these guys work these things out themselves. It's none of our business to get involved in the middle of it.
Can we come home to a state issue?
A state issue, yes.
Republican Brian Kolb of Ontario County is out of the top leadership post for the Republicans in the state assembly. He's been replaced by Assemblyman Will Barclay of Oswego. What do you think of this whole thing?
Well, as you know, I've not been a friend of Mr. Kolb's at all since he went out of his way to redistrict Phil Palmisano out of the Hornell area. And he did the same thing to Burling up in the Batavia area. Burling, of course, just dropped out of the state assembly. And Mr. Palmisano, of course, was able to put together a base in Corning and up in Seneca County and some other areas, and is continuing to serve. But that kind of treatment, so that Mr. Kolb can hang on to his seat, I think is frankly pretty outrageous. And I've always thought that. Now this alcohol-related offense that he's got himself involved in, and his treatment of it, I think is hurt him even more. And as you know, I guess he is alleged to have told the wrecker driver that it was his wife driving, not him. And you know how women drive.
That's what he said.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Now he was heavily intoxicated. They say at the time.
Well, these long-time. Let's put it this way: long-time drunks. They can take a blood alcohol content way up there. I've had them come into court 0.23, and they're still walking around when you and I, Brian, would be lying on the floor. So a 0.16, he may well have felt he was still in control. But the point about Barclay, I was talking to some folks that were at the a meeting of the state Republican chairman in Albany this week, and Mr. Barclay came in to speak to him briefly, and he got a standing ovation. We're very pleased to see him.
Now, is that because Barclay's great or because Kolb was not great?
I guess you'd have to ask the county chair.
Yeah, interesting.
I knew his father.
Barclays?
Yeah, his father, I think it was now, 88, and still active as an attorney there, tied into a bank up there in the Syracuse area. Father, very fine man, and pretty powerful in the state Senate for a long time. A really decent guy. I don't know his son at all, frankly. But also at the meeting there in Albany this week, Mr. Flanagan came in, and his reception was not nearly as enthusiastic as Mr. Barclay's. In fact, I don't think he's got too many friends left among the state chairs. Of course, that goes back to the practice of the state Senate under the Republicans to just ignore the rest of the Republican organization around the state and act as kind of an independent party on their own. And,
downstate only.
Well, not necessarily that. That's pushing a little bit. But certainly, for example, as we said before, when Astorino ran, Flanagan and the Republicans made a deal with Cuomo, and they basically undercut Astorino. And Cuomo then undercut any Democrat candidates for the state Senate. So those sorts of things, of course, have happened in New York politics over the years many times. But Mr. Flanagan was not warmly received, and my understanding is that the New York State Republican senators, they don't even have an office of their own anymore, I guess. I guess they finally had to get some space in the state Republican offices to, try to put a few secretaries together and whatever. So they're really hurting for money. And as you know, yesterday, another senator declared he was not going to run for re-election.
Right.
Senator LaValle from down around, Port Jefferson, down in that area. A very decent guy. Again, I worked with him occasionally, and no, he's fine. But he said he's had enough, too. So that brings it up to something like 7 or 8
jumping ship
Republicans that won't be.
And they're not going to the other side. They're just resigning. No. They're just leaving.
Yeah. No, those. Yeah.
Why do you think they're not going to the other side?
Well, because they're Republicans. They're basically Republicans. And I think their basic problem is that, number one, they don't see much of a chance at all that the Republicans will regain the majority in the state Senate. And they can see, just as we'd see, that the Democrats then will redraw the districts for the state Senate, which will make it even more difficult for them to run. And second, I think they have a real problem with the quality of the leadership for the Republicans in the state Senate right now, which I think is abysmal.
And should have gone to Kathy Young.
Yeah, well, it certainly should have. And
because she could win elections for those guys.
Yeah, well, she did for a long time, that's for sure. So it's, again, it's very grim for the Republicans across the board. And, again, I still think Cuomo could well end up in this presidential contest as things continue to get more and more confused on the Democrat side.
Dr. Heineman, Cuomo said at his State of the State speech Wednesday that he wants to legalize marijuana this year.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. We've got this opioid epidemic, and going the marijuana route is, I think, just part and parcel of that. Although, of course, there are people that will argue that it's not, but it's. I think it's a mistake. But we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Moving back to the national scene, Dr. Heineman,
yes.
The Democrat candidate is hoping to win the White House in November.
The what?
In November, the Democrat candidates for president.
You think they think they're going to win the presidency?
Well, the list of them, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and so on and so forth. What do you make of them?
Well, I think that Warren is losing steam right now, and we're heading into Iowa here pretty soon. Bernie seems to be picking up a little steam. I think one of the candidates that will increasingly move toward the fore is Mr. Bloomberg, but of course he's not in Iowa or New Hampshire. And I think one thing we should look at here, Brian, and this is kind of over and above this whole political campaign effort here, is the Democrats going on and on about the tremendous income inequality in this country and how we have all these wealthy people and other people who aren't nearly as wealthy. And I think, frankly, Brian, they're missing the point as to what's happening in this country. And what's really happening is the growth and tremendous power that these social networks and social platforms have developed, so that people like Zuckerberg and the people at Google and Facebook, and with the use of these smartphones and the social media, it's possible now to build these huge, what we call algorithms on people's beliefs, behavior, and an algorithm, just for our audience, you take all this data from your smartphone, for example. They're recording this data all the time, and when you buy anything, go to McDonald's, whatever, you're making choices, and those choices are all being recorded. And what then the people in Silicon Valley and other places do is put all these choices together into kind of a graphic of how people feel about a particular situation. And that becomes an algorithm. And so by knowing who you are, Brian O'Neill, They can tell what your voting preference is, what your selection is going to be at the local Pizza Hut. They can tell a huge number of things about you. And it's a tremendously powerful device. And again, the Democrat candidates are just totally out of the loop on this. Plus, it's basically unregulated. And the one candidate who is not out of the loop on that is Bloomberg. And Bloomberg is working very hard to build algorithms that are really very, what he hopes are very accurate reads on what the voting public will support and what they won't support. And so you're going to see him, I think, begin to edge up higher and higher in the polls, and he's already up around 6 or 8% now. So he's come from 1 or 2% up to this level, and well, we'll see how good his people are. But it's a powerful, powerful tool, and I think people are just unaware of this, how effective this can be.
And you think that Bloomberg's knowledge of algorithms can boost his campaign?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the direction he's going to be going. His ads, his direct mailings, his calls, his positions, if he ever goes into debates. Some people think he just won't go into the debates at all.
Is that a good move?
I don't know.
It's less attention, but getting a lot of attention has not helped Joe Biden terribly.
Right. And getting lost in the pack is probably not the way to go.
Right.
So he's made some, choices there, and the guy's a pretty bright fellow. I think we'll see how his ability to use his money and, craft a constituency out of the voting public there. Well, let's see how he pulls it off. Yeah.
Dr. Heineman, we got to go in a couple of minutes, but I did want to get your thoughts on this news of Bill Clinton, photos surfacing of him on the Epstein airplane there, what was it called? The Lolita Express?
I believe that was the name of it, yes.
Yeah, does that hurt Hillary or Chelsea's possible Hillary's possible ambitions, Chelsea's possible ambitions?
She has kind of dropped to the background now. And I don't know whether this has anything to do with the Epstein situation or not. Obviously, the people are still poking and shoving and trying to find more and more on this whole Epstein scandal, really, because they're not satisfied that all the facts have come out, which I think they clearly have not. But, yeah, this picture of, I think it's, Ghislaine, that's a hard G.
I don't know how to pronounce the name. I saw that, yeah.
Standing there at the door of the Lolita Express with Bill Clinton's hand on her shoulder. I guess, I don't know whether they're getting on or getting off, frankly. But in any case, from what I've seen and what I've heard, is that she has gone underground and tried to go out of sight, but she's bragged.
Who's she?
Ghislaine.
Oh, the girl, the person who was the girl in the picture at the time.
The alleged procuress has bragged, I think to her sister, or at least her sister has bragged, that she has so much dirt on such important people.
Oh, you're talking about Epstein's girlfriend.
I think that's
not the girl that was in the picture.
That's the girl that was in the picture.
Well, there's another girl in the picture who was a teenage girl at the time.
Well, no, this is that's not the picture I saw.
You're talking about the that New York City lady.
I'm talking about, yes, the woman who was the alleged.
Okay, sorry, I was confused. Yeah.
Yes, you have to pay attention here, Brian. Yes. So, in any case, she's bragged that she has so much dirt on so many important people that no one will dare to out her. And that is not the sort of thing I would be bragging about if I were she, because the chances of
doesn't make you any safer.
Something untoward happening to her.
Yikes!
I think go up pretty high there. But
yikes!
The fact of the matter is, she is hidden away somewhere, and I'm not certain. I don't think it's in this country. She's off somewhere else, keeping a low profile. So when they finally get hold of her, and I think the FBI would very much like to talk to her, who knows what's going to come out of this? And
Oh, boy.
It might well include Bill, you know.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Well, Doc, we have to get going. I want to thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, thanks, Brian. Perhaps you'll invite me again sometime.
That'd be great.
All